Tech Cocktail Sessions, educational and inspirational talks from experienced startup founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders.
Hi guys, my name's Jen. This is my second year in Las Vegas, and I cannot see anything, so I have to do this. I moved here 2 years ago when my co-founder and I heard about a crazy thing called the Downtown Project. So we had heard from some of our investors that a guy named Tony Hsieh, who I immediately connected with shoes, being someone who likes to buy shoes, was revitalizing an area of Las Vegas. I had only ever flown through Vegas. Raise your hand if you've ever been anywhere other than the Strip on other trips. Yeah? Raise your hand if you live downtown. Yes, okay. Raise your hand if you're a tech founder. Okay, good. I ended up building my dream job downtown, but I want to back up and tell you a little bit about how that happened and some of the things I learned along the way, some of which were really fun to learn, and some of which were not so fun to learn. 5 years ago, I moved to Silicon Valley with a suitcase. I was coming from a nonprofit healthcare background in Washington, D.C., and I was volunteering for Matthew Holt, who had just started a blog called the Healthcare Blog, and then started a conference called Health 2.0. And I was absolutely and utterly convinced that someone should build mobile health technologies that connected patients and providers, and that surely this would be easy, right? No, actually it turns out it's not easy and it's not right. I guess the theme of the next probably 3.5 years of my life as a startup founder can be summed up in a Richard Dawkins quote. In theory, I wanted to build a really great, successful startup. I had an amazing co-founder, a really great concept, a huge market, excellent advisors, and the best funders you can find. But in practice, there was a snag. Raise your hand if you've ever hit a snag. Okay, now raise your hand if you're doing exactly what you want to be doing in your life right now. Holy, that is probably 75% of the audience. Look around, because these are happy people around you. Okay. Raise your hand if you are not doing exactly what you want to be doing in your life right now. We've talked before. Yeah. Okay, why is that? I think that for me, some of the things that I hit along the way to kind of successful entrepreneurship, and I'm not there yet by any means, involved living up to other people's expectations for me. I was a non-engineering, non-tech founder when I entered Y Combinator in the summer of 2010, and I'm a woman. I was the first of that kind of founder classification to go through YC, and there had only been 6 female founders at that time, 3 of whom were also in my batch. To say that I started out with a handicap would be a vast understatement. But as it turns out, Y Combinator reserves, sort of informally, a certain portion of their founding class for outliers. And these are people that they just can't predict what they're going to do. So I was one of those. Raise your hand if you think you're an outlier. Okay, nice. If you have to ask yourself that question, as Paul Graham would say, you're probably not one. But if you are one, there are good places to develop the skill sets that you're going to need to be successful, however you define that. And that was the first lesson that I learned, and it kind of smacked me in the face during Y Combinator. There's an expectation in Y Combinator that you're going to build a strong engineering-driven company, and that if you don't successfully raise, $2 to $3 million at the end of YC, at the very least you're going to be an attractive acqui-hire for Google or Facebook or another tech company in the Valley. And it's the kind of unwritten code that you're going to build your company that way, so at least you can be something. Founders that really swing for the fences and take huge risks are part of that outlier class, but most often our first or second or third startups are not successful because we're trying something so big that even the larger companies who are looking for smart engineers or polymath salespeople won't touch us. They look at us and think, you're not going to work for anyone else ever. That was my first lesson in YC. Unfortunately, I didn't listen to investors and founders and Facebook mentors who told me that. I had to learn it the hard way, again and again and again. Luckily, what happened when I came to Las Vegas and met Tony, I met another person that I don't think will ever work for someone else. and he was doing amazing, gigantic things. You know, who sees a city and says, this can be a startup? Who sees a city and says, I can change this? Who sees a city and says, I will fund education, I will fund small business, I will fund technology? It is the craziest kind of risk. And Tony is not using that kind of drive to build a rocket or go to the moon. He's using it to build things downtown. And I found that absolutely magnetic. My co-founder did not, which was unfortunate. The second lesson I learned, pick your people wisely. In a technology company, in life, the partners that you choose to walk the road with will make or break your dreams. And in my case, I picked poorly. I picked an amazing guy, Buster Benson, who now works at Twitter. He's a phenomenal talent. He wanted to build something very specific and smaller. And my ambition was huge and unbounded and dangerous. Hopefully still is. But what I learned was that you should absolutely be on the same page with the people that you start a company with about where you want to go, and you should try to quantify that risk as much as possible. If you're in a technology company, you should discuss what you think the value of your company is, how big you want to build that valuation to be, and what you would sell for. And then what Buster and I found is actually the number that you would sell for will change. Because if you're interesting enough or you're developing technology that is valuable enough or perceived to be valuable enough, you will get offers for acquisition or for acqui-hire, which is an acquisition for the talent of your team rather than for your product. And those acqui-hires can be absolutely devastating to the cohesion of your team, especially if one founder will accept that number and the other founder will not. And in our case, that did happen. We were based in Seattle. It was before we moved to Vegas and we turned down the offer. Looking back, I'm not sure if I would accept it now or not, but it would definitely mean that I didn't end up in Vegas. It means that I would still be working for a company that is now doing health plans for a health insurer in Seattle. And I think that that's probably a fate worse than death. So glad I didn't do that. Lesson 2. Lesson 3. However hard you think you can push yourself, you can probably push harder. And I know that sounds ridiculously trite, but I'll give some examples. When I moved to Vegas and when my co-founder and I decided not to go further together, I had to decide if I would start another company or if I would join another company. And I met the Remotive team. It was 3 guys, Keller, Peter, and Fu, in their 20s, running around unshowered, building little robot parts, you know, with things spread out on cookie sheets in this apartment Tony had loaned them in the Ogden. And my heart just dropped because I thought, these guys are never going to get anything done. And Tony was bringing them leftover pizza and all this kind of stuff. And they had a big vision. They had a vision to bring a robot into every home in the US, a robot, to build and design a robot that would be easy enough that my 5-year-old niece Ellen could use, that my mom Susan, who's a behavioral health nurse, could use, in addition to tech geeks. And I thought that this was absolutely amazing. And they had kickstarted it because everybody thought they were too crazy to actually venture fund. So they were right up my alley. I ended up leaving the company that I had founded and joining Remotive. And this was a big move. 2 of my investors told me I made the right decision, and one of them said he would never speak to me again. But I had to do something that I believed in, and that was joining a team that had a vision that was so powerful and so compelling, and also so difficult to achieve that it would take everything that I had and more to fulfill it. And it did. Yesterday, Romo the robot, we worked so hard for almost 2.5 years now to build, finally got onto the shelves in Brookstone stores. But it took a team of 20 people, 24 months of blood, sweat, tears, burnout. I can tell you stories that will give you white hair if you don't already have it, and more if you do, to accomplish. But the great news is I kind of found my calling there. Building hardware is unlike building any other kind of company or product. Actually designing and building something that people can hold in their hands, that they might use once a week, twice a week, maybe every day if you're really, really lucky and really, really good, it's incredibly powerful. There is something in us that is still so physical. For as much as we now connect with each other online, me actually making something that you can use and hold and touch connects me to you in a way that is not possible with Facebook or Twitter or a text or even a phone call. And I found that magnetic. And so when I joined Remotive, it was a group of small guys, and at first my first job actually was to figure out how to attach the phone to the robot base. I'm not an engineer. I've never seen a circuit board before. I've never soldered. And the hack that we figured out to put the robot to a laser cut acrylic panel and hold it, I wish I had Aroma with me now, was actually to sew an elastic band and to strap it around the robot in the back of the laser cut plate. And we're all sitting down like divvying up tasks, you know, with a whiteboard, and Peter's like, I'll solder. And Keller's like, great, I'll twist the motor wires. And Fu was like, great, I'll program the software. And they're like, Jen, you sew. And I'm like, fuck you guys, just because I'm a chick doesn't mean I know how to sew. Like, but I can figure it out, right? So I actually like looked online, found a 24-hour Walmart, got a Singer sewing machine, read the manual, like was gonna call my mom because she actually can sew, thanks mom, but like a hand running stitch, set up the Singer, like did some test runs on a pair of Keller's old climbing shorts and was like, okay, we're good to go. Put the elastic in the machine, it pulled it down through the presser foot, and then the machine started smoking, and I'm like, I can't sew. This is all going to go to hell. As it turns out, you can't sew like really thin bands of elastic. Anyone who sews here. Anybody sew here, actually? Okay. You know this, right? I mean, it was ridiculous to try to do this, like utterly ridiculous. So I ended up hot gluing instead. And we shipped 100 Romos before Christmas. My other job was to create a fold for the Remotive t-shirt that exactly showed the Heart Robots portion of the I Heart Robots logo. I spent hours upon hours doing this. In doing this, I learned what for me was one of the most important lessons, lesson number, what am I on, 4? I'm a product person. I'm absolutely obsessed with the total product experience. And that means from the time you see something online or on a shelf, and you pick up that box and you take it home, and you open it up, and you pull something out, every point of that, and turn it on, and hopefully, please God, it works. Every point of that, I am obsessed with making sure that it's beautiful and integrated and intuitive, and it just makes sense. Turns out those are ridiculously hard steps that require things like product packaging design and user experience design and all of the things that we spent the next 2 years at Remotive learning about the hard way. My next job for Remotive after sewing elastic and folding t-shirts was moving to China. Lesson 5. If you ever get the opportunity to do something that you think is absolutely and utterly insane, go for it. So we were supposed to produce a lot of these robots for a store that is not Brookstone. And we didn't know how to do it. We realized we were hand building everything in-house. And we couldn't continue to build these robots for normal people with the parts laid out on cookie sheets. And our co-founder, Peter, for our quality assurance test, putting the robot on his stomach, driving it for 4 seconds in 4 directions and saying, pass. It's not exactly like a clean room certified process here. In addition, we figured out things almost too late, right before we were kind of due to set up the vendor relationship with this very big store. The robot had open ports to the main circuit board, so that you could theoretically do things like plug in LEDs if you were a hobbyist level hacker. As it turns out, that's not very safe. And also we had a LiPo battery. Anybody here in hardware ever worked with LiPos? Okay, so you don't want to ship a consumer product with LiPos. In fact, most retailers now won't even accept shipment of those products. They'll make you switch to something like NIMH, which is like a traditional AA battery. But we had designed the whole robot with LiPo. So needless to say, that robot was not going to ship to this retailer, but we had already put in orders for some of the component parts at large volumes. So the only way we could think to fix this was to go to a manufacturer in China and say, help us. So we did. The co-founder, Peter, and I hopped on a plane. We worked with a group called Dragon Innovation that came from Hasbro and iRobot, and we wrote this kind of totally fictional RFQ for a robot redesign that didn't exist yet, because we knew we would have to move away from the LiPo battery and close off the circuit board, but we had no industrial designer on the team. We had no electrical engineer on the team. We had no firmware engineer on the team. Our only mechanical engineer, Peter, was 22, and he had dropped out at the University of Arizona after breadboarding Romo's sole circuit board, the like point version 0001 that shipped to Kickstarter backers. And you had me, an ex-Marcom, ex-health geek, who who was 10 years older than the rest of the team with no engineering background, but man, I could write a fictional RFQ. So on a plane, we hopped and we flew to China. When I packed my suitcase, I had just talked to Bree Pettis of MakerBot, who is one of our advisors and a really amazing guy and mentor of mine who just sold the company to Stratasys. They build a desktop 3D printer. And Bree is often credited, I think somewhat correctly, with starting the desktop 3D printing revolution. Like he saw it, this future, and he absolutely made it happen through 5 years of blood, sweat, and tears. And Bree had gotten on Skype with me before we went to China and said, somebody has to be the badass American boss who yells at everybody, makes everybody afraid, like slams the things down and makes shit happen. Doesn't matter what language you speak. And everybody looked at me. And I knew I was in trouble. I was like, damn it. So I went to like to Harry and got these business suits and like watched a bunch of 80s like power shoulder pad women, you know, movies. Because the rest of the time I'm one of the guys. I'm wearing like you guys who live in Ogden know me. It's like, Jen? I'm wearing robot hoodies and like sweatpants and I haven't showered in 4 days. Like I work at a startup robotics company. I don't have any of this stuff. But I took on that role, and when I packed my suitcase, I told the guys there was a 50-50 chance that I wasn't coming home anytime soon. And there were 6 of us at that point. And everybody laughed, and they're like, ha ha ha, see you soon, Jen. And I'm like, guys, Bree told me there's this thing called tool start, where you have to cut big blocks of steel, and like robot parts pop out of it. And that is about as much knowledge as we had of manufacturing when I moved to China. There are many more steps than that. And I didn't come home. I toured 10 factories with Peter in 14 days. We went all through China. Neither of us spoke Mandarin. We were learning on a Mind Snacks app on the plane over. We had a consultant with us, and what happened over the next 8 months is we just figured it out. Lesson number 6, the most important thing you can do is set a goal that you think is incredibly too ambitious. Keep it, but work backwards from that goal. In a hardware company, that's called a PDS, or a production development schedule. You usually Gantt chart it out. The only thing that you have to do, I think, to achieve those kinds of audacious goals individually, just create a personal development schedule. Like, take the subjectivity and the fear out of it as much as you can, set a ridiculously audacious goal, and then kind of schedule yourself backward from that. And I learned at Remotive that like the higher you set those goals, like if you try to remove the fear and be concrete and logical about approaching that, if you find the right resources, you'll probably be surprised because you can hit the challenge that you thought was ridiculously too hard. And we did. We did it again and again and again at Remotive. And that taught us that like failure was kind of in our minds. If we thought we were going to fail, then we would. But if we thought we would succeed, we also would. We did some incredible things. We talked Apple into shipping us dock connectors above like our certification, all kinds of crazy stuff, because we just didn't accept that things were impossible. I'm going to kind of stop there because I think I'm probably close to time, but the only other thing I want to share is that 4 months ago, my family, my Remotive family, moved back to San Francisco, and I stayed. And it was probably the hardest thing I've ever done. It was harder than breaking up with my previous co-founder. We were a family of 20 people who ran, you know, crazy together. Our robot was in 2 weddings while we lived here. Once as the ring bearer, and once he misbehaved, and so we ran up and pulled him. And the reason that I stayed is because Remotive is still on a journey to build a personal robot that goes into everyone's homes. And to do that, they had to move to San Francisco to find certain types of engineers. It was just really hard to recruit here. And I thought, aha, there's my next impossible challenge. How do we get an environment for those kinds of companies to not have to leave Vegas? Because it's actually a great place to build hardware. It's cheap. You can focus on what you love to do. There's not the echo and noise that there is in the Valley. You're not competing against hundreds of other startups for the same bit of attention and the same bit of people's time. And every day, you and your tech have to interact with real people in the real world. And I think that right now, the hardware sector is in danger of being too intellectual and not humane. And if you live in Vegas, your neighbors are the ones testing your technology all the time. You have to build with them in mind, not with a kind of inflated idea of what tech people want. And so if you're thinking about building hardware, about building a company, I think Vegas is the place to do it. And I hope you'll let me help. Thank you.